Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep today into an idea that, well, on the surface might sound a bit like giving up. The concept that ultimately it doesn't matter. Now stick with us here. This isn't about apathy or, just throwing your hands up. The material we've looked through articles, research, notes from different angles paints this really different picture. It suggests the state isn't passive indifference at all, but actually a powerful, almost radical path to freedom and wisdom. And maybe counterintuitively, it's seen as something attainable by strong individuals. So, our goal in this deep dive is to really cut through those common misunderstandings. We want to explore what this idea truly means according to these sources and why embracing it is presented as so profoundly liberating. We'll be focusing on the core concepts themselves, using the kind of language the material uses to really get to the heart of it, trying to keep it focused on the universal ideas.
Yeah, and that's such a crucial starting point, getting clear on what this isn't. When you first hear "it doesn't matter," it's easy to jump to thinking about, say, agonizing over past choices. That whole road not taken thing, wondering if you picked the right path, if another choice would lead to a better outcome. That kind of regret.
Oh, absolutely. That feeling of, did I mess up back there?
Exactly. But the perspective we're digging into today, it's fundamentally different. It's more about finding freedom by, well, letting go of that constant, often exhausting effort to control everything, every outcome, every possibility.
Trying to manage it all.
Right. It's liberation from being completely tied to how things should have gone or how you desperately need them to turn out in the future. And importantly, freeing yourself from that heavy burden of constantly managing how other people see you.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting for me. If the struggle isn't fundamentally about making the perfect choices or controlling the outside world, then where does all this strain and worry come from? The sources seem to point inward, right? To something they call a kind of brain trap.
Precisely. I mean, think about what your mind does when you're not, actively focused on something specific. It tends to wander, doesn't it?
Definitely. Replaying things, worrying.
Yeah, replaying conversations, worrying about what might happen,
Hmm.
maybe obsessing a little over what someone else thinks.
Yeah.
There's this brain network, often called the default mode network, that seems kind of wired for exactly that kind of internal chatter, rumination.
The background noise generator?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating how much energy we pour into this network, dwelling on things that, when you really step back and look objectively, well, they often ultimately don't matter in the grand scheme of things. And this tendency, this getting caught in loops about the past, anxieties about the future, what others think the material suggests, it can actually get stronger over time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And this constant holding on, this clinging, this is a term used across many wisdom traditions, clinging to these thoughts, outcomes, identities, that's often pinpointed as a major source of our suffering.
So, okay, let's pull that together. This state of it doesn't matter. It's presented less as a factual statement about, say, the objective value of things and more like a powerful shift in perspective.
Exactly. It's about learning to recognize this brain trap for what it often is, a mental construct. It's
Yeah.
built on projections, interpretations, memories, anxieties, not necessarily the solid reality of the present moment.
So it's like seeing the matrix almost.
Right.
Seeing that getting tangled up in what happened 5 years ago or what might happen next week or what your neighbor thinks. It's a kind of self-imposed prison.
That's a good way to put it because, as this perspective really highlights, the only moment you ever truly live in, the only time you can actually act, is right now, this present moment.
Which brings us to aging. This was maybe the most surprising part of the material for me.
It's definitely countercultural, isn't it?
Yeah.
We usually see aging as, loss, physical decline, maybe changing roles in society. But these sources, they frame it very differently. They suggest viewing it as a unique privilege, actually, a powerful catalyst toward achieving this state of ultimate liberation.
A privilege. How so?
Well, think about the things we often cling to so tightly when we're younger. Our identity tied to career, our status, accumulating wealth, fitting in, how we look.
Yeah, the external stuff.
Exactly. As we age, the grip of those things often naturally starts to loosen. The pressure to perform for others, that relentless chase for external validation. It tends to dissipate, doesn't it?
It often does seem that way.
And the sources argue this isn't about giving up or becoming irrelevant. It's described more like a shedding, a natural distillation process.
Yeah.
It leads to a deeper kind of wisdom that comes simply from having lived, from navigating life's complexities over decades.
Okay, but why is aging specifically seen as this key? What does getting older unlock, according to this perspective?
It seems to come down to this deep, almost physical understanding of impermanence. For older individuals, it's not just some abstract philosophical concept they read about. It's a lived reality. It's felt in the bones.
Hmm.
They've directly experienced their own bodies changing, maybe health challenges arising. They've seen relationships evolve, shift, sometimes end. They've witnessed loved ones pass away. The world itself transforms around them over time.
Constant change becomes undeniable.
Absolutely. And that constant direct witnessing of change makes it incredibly clear how fleeting so many things are. Things we perhaps poured enormous energy into worrying about when we were younger. In the face of life's undeniable flow, it becomes clear that many of those things ultimately didn't matter in the deepest sense. That wisdom isn't learned, it's earned through experience. And, this perspective also suggests that reaching this state of it doesn't matter isn't like flipping a switch. It happens on different levels.
Ah, okay. It's a process.
Right. You might start at what you could call a beginner level. Maybe that's just finding a bit more freedom from the small daily annoyances, the traffic jam, spilling your coffee, that kind of thing,
Right.
letting it go easier.
Less sweating the small stuff.
Exactly. Then there's maybe an intermediate level. This is where you start finding real liberation from the bigger weights, those lingering regrets about the past, or maybe those anxieties about the future that can feel paralyzing. And then the most advanced level, this is described as a really profound freedom. It's liberation from the very concept of a fixed, separate self, this me, that needs constant defending, constant validation.
Wow.
Reaching that deeper stage is seen as the highest form of liberation, bringing this incredible sense of peace, because you're free from that exhausting, lifelong effort of trying to control who you are and how the world sees you.
That sounds incredibly deep. Peaceful, yes, but doesn't the idea that nothing ultimately matters risk leading straight into, well, apathy or just indifference? That's the big objection that just pops into my head, and I bet a lot of people listening feel that too.
It's the critical question, absolutely. And the material we look at is really, really clear on this. This state is explicitly not indifference. It's not apathy. In fact, it introduces this really fascinating idea. They call it the paradoxical doesn't matter.
Paradoxical? How so?
Okay, the idea is this. By recognizing that something doesn't matter in the specific way your brain trap is telling you it does, by releasing that desperate, anxious grip you have on it, you paradoxically free up energy, you free up focus, and you can then engage more fully, more intensely with what is truly essential right here, right now.
Okay, hang on. Give me an example.
Right. Think about, say, health anxiety.
Yeah.
If you're consumed by worry about a potential health issue, that worry itself is draining your energy, right? It's
Yeah.
not actually helping.
Totally. It just makes things worse.
But if you can approach that worry with the perspective that the anxiety itself, the clinging to the fear, doesn't actually matter in terms of solving the problem or changing the potential outcome, you might paradoxically free up mental space. Space to focus on practical steps you can take, maybe, or just as importantly, space to simply live the current day you do have fully, which is the truly important thing, isn't it?
I see. It's like letting go of the struggle against reality.
Exactly. It's very similar to concepts like psychological acceptance. You're not endorsing the bad thing, but you're stopping the fight against the feeling or the thought of it. So it's not apathy at all. It's actually a shift towards a deeper, more authentic kind of engagement that comes from that liberation, from letting go of the attachment.
That makes a lot more sense. It's subtle. And the material even talks about this state being like unlocking a kind of superpower. That sounds a bit dramatic. What do they mean by that?
It does sound dramatic, I agree. But the connection starts to make sense when you look at the effects described in the sources. This state, essentially by freeing you from all that background noise, the clinging, the worrying, the self-monitoring it, just opens up so much mental space. The material actually links it quite directly to the psychological concept of flow state, that feeling,
Oh, yeah, getting lost in something.
right? Being completely absorbed in an activity. Self-consciousness just disappears. Concerns about how you're doing, what the outcome will be, they just melt away. Clinging doesn't matter in flow.
And that's where creativity happens, peak performance.
Exactly. Flow states are linked to high creativity, problem-solving, peak experiences. And the sources suggest that living more consistently from this place where the non-essential stuff doesn't matter can tap into that same kind of potential. It basically gives you a kind of superpower for living more fully, more effectively.
So what are some of these specific superpowers they mention?
Well, several things come up. A definite boost to creativity is one. Another is a kind of radical shift in perspective that seems to expand and deepen the richness of the present moment. It can even make time feel less rushed, even as you get older, because you're savoring each moment more instead of just rushing towards the next thing.
Interesting. What else?
The ability to deepen relationships seems key. By releasing your expectations of other people, letting go of how you think they should be, you can engage with them more authentically, just as they are. That's huge. And maybe the biggest one, it's suggested this perspective can transform the fear of death. Not necessarily eliminate it, but shift it towards something like, well, curiosity perhaps, or just a calm acceptance of life's natural cycle.
That's profound.
It is. And building on that, the material, often drawing from traditions like Zen that are mentioned in the sources, describes this potential final stage of the journey. It's a state where you deeply know, not just think, but know in your bones that everything is impermanent, that it all doesn't matter in that old clinging way we used to believe. And yet, having reached that understanding, you still consciously choose. You choose to find meaning. You choose to appreciate beauty, to love, to feel joy, and yes, even to feel sadness and shed tears when life brings them.
So it's not detachment, it's knowing engagement.
Precisely. You're
Yeah.
engaging fully with the world, but you're doing it with this constant gentle awareness of its ever-changing impermanent nature. And aging, having potentially stripped away so many of those earlier attachments we talked about, is often seen as a time that's particularly ripe for reaching this kind of knowing engagement.
And you mentioned rediscovery, too.
Yes. What's really interesting is how, as one ages and maybe sheds the things that seem so vital but ultimately didn't deliver lasting fulfillment, the status, the constant acquiring the things that truly matter, often come into incredibly sharp focus.
Like what?
Simple things, often. A quiet moment, just observing nature,
No.
genuine connection with family or friends, the taste of a really good cup of coffee. It's like rediscovering these essential values that might have gotten buried under all the noise of chasing things that, well, didn't really matter after all.
It sounds like clearing away the clutter to see what was important all along.
That's a great way to put it. And there's even this suggestion that this shedding of baggage, this release from clinging, can bring back something like a beginner's mind.
Mhm.
Remember that feeling, where the world feels fresh and new and kind of full of wonder again, because it's unburdened by all our expectations and past disappointments.
That idea of rediscovering what truly matters, that really resonates. This whole thing sounds less like a quick technique and much more like a profound, maybe even a lifelong journey of letting go.
I think that's right. It's definitely presented as a path, not a destination you arrive at overnight.
So for someone listening who's intrigued by this, who wants to maybe start exploring this perspective, are there any practical steps suggested in the material? Where do you even begin with something this big?
Yeah, there are some concrete suggestions. One really practical one is to consciously try and identify the things in your own life that consistently steal your energy, the things that occupy that default mode network that keep you ruminating. But when you're really honest with yourself, they ultimately don't matter much in the context of your deeper values, or even just the reality of this present moment.
Make a list, maybe.
Exactly. Make a list. And then perhaps practice consciously letting go of your emotional or mental grip on just one of those things each day. Not fighting it, just releasing the tension around it. See what happens. The core practice really seems to be about shifting your energy, moving it inward. So instead of constantly trying to manipulate external events or manage how others see you things, you actually have pretty limited control over anyway. You focus your energy on cultivating your inner state, your presence, your response to what's actually happening right now.
Shifting from external control to internal liberation.
That's it. It's a fundamental shift.
Okay, so to try and bring this all together, this deep dive seems to suggest that embracing this idea that it doesn't matter defined in this specific way isn't about becoming passive or giving up at all.
Not at all.
It's actually presented as this really profound act of liberation, freeing ourselves from that exhausting mental trap of clinging to things that are inherently impermanent, constantly worrying about the past and future, trying to control things way beyond our reach.
Mhm. And crucially, this liberation, according to the material, doesn't lead to checking out of life. Quite the opposite. It actually leads to a deeper, more focused engagement with what truly is essential.
Which is?
The richness of this present moment. Genuine connection with others. A rediscovery of life's fundamental beauty and meaning, perhaps. It's described as a path, often illuminated by the wisdom that can come with aging, that ultimately promises more peace, maybe enhanced creativity, and a life lived with a clearer sense of purpose and, freedom.
A powerful perspective shift. Okay, let's leave our listeners with this thought then. If the wisdom of it doesn't matter, as we've explored it from these sources, reveals that so many of the things we chased and clung to, maybe especially in youth, weren't truly the most important things in the grand scheme, what might be the single most important thing you could focus your energy on right now in this present moment?